Okay. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Sarah Conway. I'm going to be the discussion facilitator for the Unit 2 for this class.
And I am Valerie Rivera again, and it's just us two.
Yep, just those two. So we can jump right in. The first video was video 2.1. It's about the fear response and the impact of that on childhood trauma. I think a good question is the what does it mean to be sensitized and the false associations and how this concept of sensitization can relate to associations and addictions and how you'll use this information in the future.
Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting how both of the readings kind of went over being sensitized and how someone can come about that of like the overstimulus or the overstimuli and your brain connecting certain, I guess, trauma stressors and kind of just not over exaggerating, but then everything kind of becomes a bigger deal, whether that's like a child crying over something or, throwing a tantrum. It's oversensitizing, whatever sometimes that's associated with. And then, yeah, so then that also connects to the false accusations. When a person connects to a neutral stimuli with traumatic experiences leading to inappropriate fears or stress responses to things that are not actually threatening. So I feel like for me, a false association might be is like my siblings used to always play pranks on me and they used to hide under the bed. So for the longest, I would say I was sensitized as a child because I was always afraid. And my like false associations with my bed was, oh no, there's someone under there
Yeah.
and they're going to grab me and I'm going to die. So for the longest, I actually my sister got punished, but her punishment was I had to sleep with her because
Oh my
she
God.
was the one who scared me and pretty much sensitized me into this like false association of my
Yeah.
bed and like a monster being under it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually so funny. That's actually one of the examples I brought up because I would do that to my younger brother. And I didn't ever have to sleep with him, which I guess is good. But
As a
um
younger sibling, please
yeah.
don't do that. I'm still,
Yeah.
it's funny because now I can joke about it, but for so many
As a
years, like
child.
I was just so afraid like someone's gonna
Yeah.
grab me.
And that totally makes sense. Like you get used to something, it's so consistent, it's repetitive, and you create that false sense of reality. And it's like it makes sense. I mean, obviously that is a way less obvious. Okay, I know you were scared, but like there are much bigger, I guess, situations that it could have been worse where people are living in very negative environments and that's just something they're used to. So it is a good one. But and I never really thought about how that I guess would affect Kevin, but he's fine now. But
I'm fine, so it's
yeah.
fine.
Um yeah, I mean, and I think with that information moving forward, I guess like your parents kind of helped out by saying like, oh, you have to sleep with them, and then that reality kind of stopped because you realized that it was them. So I think just building awareness and like talking through it is definitely helpful for moving forward.
Yeah, believe me, it definitely helped with my sister having to say, it was me. There's nobody under your bed. I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, you're lying. You're still lying to me. There's a 10-year difference. And she's just like, oh, crap. So that's on her. But
Yeah,
me and your brother should be good. If I'm good, he should be good.
good. I'm glad he's going into college soon. So, but yeah, so I guess moving forward with the first reading, it was chapter 4 for the Dr. Vanderkolk guy. The question I chose that I really wanted to focus on, I just like the name aspect of it makes me understand it more, which is what are the cook, smoke detector, and watchtower, and why does he call them these names, and how do these areas of the brain function when they're threatened, and how do they work together? So I really liked the metaphors because it helps me understand them. And so, from my understanding, the cook, which was the thalamus, was kind of taking in like information from, I guess, your sensory parts, like your eyes, your ears, your skin, all that stuff, and then kind of like quickly putting that together and then like making that your sense of reality. And then I don't know. What did you think that about like the cook, I guess?
Yeah, I kind of relate to you. Like sometimes I have to correlate like different, not necessarily things, but different aspects to connect the concepts. So I like how they broke down the cook, smoke detector, and watchtower.
Mhm.
And it does make sense because it kind of just breaks down how the cook is kind of like the one that oversees it all, right? Even though it's kind of adding to it, and it's the one that breaks down all of our functions. And then the smoke detector is more in reference to our amygdala, and which
Mhm.
that one obviously is very important because it's responsible for detecting the threats and kind of like triggering our fear response. So, which then that leads into the watchtower, and that being more in reference to your prefrontal cortex.
Mhm.
And obviously, that's the one that kind of breaks down the situation like, okay, what's going on? What does, the body have to do? And I just think it's so interesting that our brains and the way that they're pretty much programmed is in a way that it's interesting because I should have wrote the page number, but it talked about how basically when our bodies are going through the motions, sometimes our actual mind itself isn't even making the decisions because the body's doing it. And it's not until we kind of get like caught up that we realize like, oh dang, like
Yeah.
that happens so fast that you don't even know that you made the decision, but it's not necessarily that you did. It's because your brain and your mind, body, and brain all went into like this fear and fight or flight mode that it was just like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what we're doing. We're doing it now. And it's
Mhm.
it's kind of one of those instances where like, people are always like, well, in a time of,
Yeah.
tragedy or something, like what would you do? And the answer is you really don't know because at the end of the day, it's really not you that's making the
Yeah.
decisions. It's your brain saying, oh crap, let's put out this fire, like
Yeah.
in reference to the smoke and smoke detector. So I thought that that was really interesting. And I never really thought about it kind of until it broke it down a little bit further. And then it kind of made me understand the concept a little bit better. Like, okay, if you correlate
Yeah.
it with a smoke detector and this, like, okay, that makes sense. Obviously, the cook's the one that's adding to it and that can
Yeah.
filter through it. But there's obviously other elements that then can be, the one that goes on fire.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you. I think that the smoke detector part of it with the amygdala was a great metaphor and how it just like putting out a fire and it's your body just kind of goes into like overdrive and you just don't know what's happening until after. And then when the watchtower kicks in, you have, I guess, a chance to process it. But you're right, like you really don't know. And I've like watched TV shows and stuff and there's a character and they're like, "Oh, like what did you do in that moment?" And they're like, I have no idea. Like my body just like did what it needed to do. And um I was thinking about when like the whole smoke detector thing, it's like an immediate fight or flight response and sometimes
Mhm.
you can't control it and sometimes it's over stimulated, kind of how in the last unit it was like sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good that it kicks in. And that's literally like a smoke detector. Like sometimes you'll be cooking and everything will be fine and the smoke detector is like going crazy
Boom.
and
Yep.
you're like, that's so annoying. But then if there was a fire, it's good. So it's like it literally is a smoke detector, and I thought that was funny. Yeah, but I'm glad they all work together. That's good for us. Um,
Yeah.
so moving into the like next reading, it was the Dr. Perry and I think Maya Skalovitz. I don't know how to say that, but it was the introductory chapter talking about Tina.
Tina. Oh,
Yeah, and
that
this,
story broke my heart.
this entire
Um,
book was just so sad, so
I'm
depressing.
not gonna lie, I legitimately cried a couple times. I mean, I told you last time, I have small children,
Yeah.
and learning about this and learning how, the doctor breaks or the psychiatrist breaks down different things and he's able to kind of
Mhm.
understand the root of the problem, like Tina specifically. So she was being raped by her neighbor's son, which unfortunately her mom couldn't afford a sitter. So she had to deal with her neighbor, like, hey, watch my children for a little bit. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, because the mom was like, oh, well, she had an older child, she would run her errands. And then he
Yeah.
was raping them from Tina was the age of 2 to 6, because I believe the Dr. Perry or yeah,
Mhm.
he started working with her when she was 7. It was just a year after that.
Yeah.
and it's just crazy that, it was going on for such a long time, and how she kind of broke down that trauma, because her current circumstance was, in school she was being like very vulgar and very, I know she would have like outbursts of like physical violence, but aside from that, she was correlating like all men in general as like sexual predators, because that's all she really knew at a young age. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, she was doing like sexual advances to other children at school. But I did find it really interesting because the last part of the question is, what did Dr. Perry learn about working with traumatized children? And there was a part in the book where he said, like, I have no experience doing that. And he was working with his supervisor. But basically, he learned that he had to create a sense of safety and trust with his patients. And
Yeah.
then ultimately, like not ultimately, but like legitimately understand their background, who they are, not what symptoms, do they need to check off, because the DSM has different criteria. So I
Yeah.
remember at the beginning of that chapter, he kind of alluded to, oh, like she had like ADHD, like check, 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 check.
Mhm.
But even in his mind, and when he was talking with his superior, he's like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like a child that has like, like ADHD doesn't do these types of things. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until, he saw the mom in the snow and just was like, you know what, I can't do this. And he started seeing a little bit more, excuse me, deeper into her life, and saw like she's actually not a bad child. Like he's seen her in action outside of the place and thought like, what happened? Like this isn't normal. And I can't just say, oh, this is her diagnosis, here's some meds. And he even said that, like, how do you undo so many years of abuse 1 hour a week, one
Yeah.
time a week? So
Definitely.
it was very interesting and very saddening. But I think it's awesome that he kind of went not necessarily outside of his practice, but kind of like outside of the box in general, and kind of just thought to himself, like, um, it's not about a criteria. And that's kind of how he started connecting. Okay, it also involves the mind, the body, and then like the overall experience that the child was going through.
No, yeah, like the fact that you brought up kind of like a checklist almost, like he realized really soon that that was not the criteria that her story was going to have to follow. And I'm glad that he adjusted that and talked to someone else and got a second opinion about it. Obviously, he's very experienced, but like getting someone else's opinion is always like a good idea. And I think it was age 2 to 6, like you said,
Mhm.
and that age for development is so crucial. And that's like when like kids start to remember stuff. And so, like, the fact that that was a norm for her is just so saddening because, like, at first she was like, obviously, probably acting really weird in school and stuff. But then when just like the advances, that's like her norm. And that's not what other children have. And so, he knew immediately that it was not that was not what was happening. And like you said, I think stability and safety is the most important thing. And so as soon as he, oh, sorry, could create a did you hear that?
I did.
Okay, that's really weird. It's on my computer. As soon as he created that stable environment, he was able to just learn more about her and that trust started building. And I think that was what most kids needed is just a break from that norm environment for them. And yeah, I just was really sad by it at the
Yeah,
very
I
end of
mean,
it.
but it was good to hear, like, at the end, she was able to, live a fairly, normal life.
No, exactly.
But
And I'm glad it's just like so hard hearing that it's good that at the end of the day it can be changed because there's been a lot of I remember in some parts of the reading, not this specific reading, but other readings, they were like it's very like set in stone, but I'm glad that it can be changed.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so for the next question, I chose it's for the Vanderkolk chapter 5.
Mhm.
How do the branches of the autonomic nervous system work together to manage the body's energy flow? What are the brakes? What do they do? What is the accelerator? What does it do? And what is heart rate variability and how it relates to those branches? I think that I also like this one because of the metaphor, kind of.
Yeah.
So the sympathetic nervous system acts as the accelerator, And this is more, I guess, your fight or flight. And so it's just kind of like how your body responds to threats, I think, by increasing heart rate and blood pressure and just kind of getting your body to like quickly take action. And
Yeah.
then like a car accelerating, which makes sense. And then the brakes are more, I think it was the pa- parasympathetic, parasympathetic.
PNS. I like that they have
PNS, yeah.
acronyms for anything. So PNS. Yeah,
Is
that kind of just kicks in and
yeah,
calms your body down.
no,
Excuse me.
exactly.
Yeah, but it's interesting how, our bodies are so quick to go into this fight or fight sense and kind of just make sure that you as a being are equipped for whatever like heightened threat that you feel, but then also that there's this immediate like break, like whoa, like should we
Yeah,
be reacting like this? Is this being like too much? But it's
yeah,
very interesting how like our body just immediately like the minute that you either feel threatened. I unfortunately was actually just in a car crash a couple weeks
oh my
ago.
gosh.
Yeah, thankfully it wasn't. I'm fine. My kids are fine, but like it happened so fast, and I remember just sitting there like, like even for I probably like a couple minutes, I could not stop shaking, and then like my breathing, I just felt like, like I like it was like more of like anxiety when I get sometimes, and I just feel like I can't breathe. And when we all pulled over, I remember just like sitting there for a little bit, like, oh, and I was really, really pissed. So I was like, I need to just stay in here and like calm down for a little bit because it was all her fault, and I was just
Yeah,
kids are in the car, the kids are in the car, let's do
yeah,
this. But that was kind of like my accelerator, like, holy crap. And then
yeah,
immediately brakes. And I was like more mad at anything. Like I was like, you are in the carpool lane, girly, with nobody with you. I have two kids. You do not
yeah,
belong here. So it's just interesting to know that, your body will react even if you don't have the chance to.
yeah. Yeah, like it seriously is an automatic response and it can be really good in those situations like that. Like your body pulled over immediately and then you set into that. And it's a good thing that we have the brakes because I think it prevents so many unnecessary, I don't know, arguments or situations that people could get into. Like I feel like for that instance, people who have road rage don't have brakes because they just continue on with their like anger and response to a situation that happened and they don't allow their body to really set in and take that time to digest what happened. And so that's kind of a disconnect with their, I guess, systems working together. They're not working together. It doesn't set in time. And yeah, that can be dangerous. So,
And I think that kind of connects to the last part of the question is what is a heart rate variability, the HRV, and how is it related to these branches? So your HRV is the variation between your different heart rate, your heartbeat. So obviously, the higher your HRV, the higher or the faster that your heart beats. And it
mhm,
reflects some like somewhat of the balance between the two symptoms, the
yeah.
SNS and the PNS. Sorry, I'm like they're really long. I'm like I should have paraphrased it. But they correlate having a high HRV is typically a good sign of your atomic function adaptability. So like you said, like for someone who has road rage, their HRV maybe just be I would assume too low. If the correlation is too high, you typically have a good sense of it. So
Yeah.
maybe it's too low that they act or react the way that they do rather than like it being a heightened and then being like almost like a calming sense is
Mhm.
kind of what I would like relate that to almost like crap.
Yeah. Like that time that it sets in is just way too long and they have very low, yeah, low HRV. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, okay. So leading into that with the chapter 2 of Dr. Harry's book, what is hyperarousal and how might a child experiencing it behave and how can you avoid behavioral and learning problems when a child is prone to hyperarousal? So from what I understood, it's just when a child is perceived to be or they perceive themselves as they're in danger or stressed, it kind
Hmm.
of alerts for the fight or flight to kick in. And it's very similar to what we were just talking about with increased heart rate and faster breathing and like everything is heightened, your emotions, everything, and you're just in more, I guess, tense situations. But I don't know, what do you think about like, because you have kids, like how you can tell that they're experiencing hyperarousal and how do you deal with that?
I think it's so interesting because, like, I guess, sorry, I don't know if you can hear my daughter in the background screaming. At least with my kids, I'm trying to change and not have generational trauma. So I can really only speak for myself. Like with them, I do try and kind of collect my thoughts. My initial reaction isn't to, blow up
Yeah.
because it kind of brings me back to when I was a child. So my dad had a very loud voice. And
Mhm.
now that we dive deeper into these readings, I kind of like connect it with my childhood trauma a little bit. Like, I mean, I'm good now, so let's just throw that out there. So I can like talk about it more freely, but I connect it to, you know, he would always be like, "What are you doing?" Or "Why didn't you clean this?" Or "Why didn't you clean that?" And he would yell at me so much that I want to say that I had hyperarousal. Like I was easily like agitated, either aggressive or I would cry easily. On top of that, I was just super agitated, and like on top of that, I would be like if someone came behind me and like tried to like mess around and be like, "Hey, Valerie," I'd be like, "Oh my God, like what are you doing?" Like I was just always like on edge. And I
Mhm.
correlate that to hyperarousal and just being like put into an environment where I was continuously yelled at, that I was always like on edge, like, okay, well, if I make sure this is clean, like I won't get yelled at. But then I was always like in that fight or flight mode, like, okay, well, if I do what I'm supposed to do, even though it
Yeah.
was like what I reference now as an adult is rage cleaning. I was just rage cleaning all the time because I'm like, okay, well, if I do this, like I won't be yelled at. But it was like the minute someone opened my door to see what I was doing, I was like, I'm so sorry. Like I was just
Yeah.
cleaning my room, and my mom would just be like, it's okay, like chill. And I would just be like, oh, like I thought you came in here to yell at me. So
Yeah.
that's that's kind of how I imagine the hyperarousal. And unfortunately, it kind of does have a negative stigma kind of attached to it. And that's kind of a lot of reasons, when children start to misbehave or
Yeah.
they're kind of like acting out, and it's hard to deal with children like that. And I know it was probably hard to deal with me because I was just like, my mom would call it over dramatic, but it was me just reacting to the way that my body knew how to, because I was always in this state of like, holy crap, like, okay, just
Yeah.
do this, do that, like, and not get yelled at. So I was always just like, okay, this is what I have to do to, make, I guess in my, like in that instance, like make my mind okay with what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you said about being on edge is just a great like recap of just what you were feeling. Like you were constantly on alert and there was no time for your brain to just really relax. And that is just that is true. Like what was it? Hyper arousal. Like
Mhm.
your body is just never or your mind is just never resting, and that's so stressful as a kid because there's so many other things that you need to focus on and there's so many other things that like should be given to you as a kid. And that kind of answers the last, I guess the second part of that question is just like if you have a child like that and you're trying to help them, the best thing you can offer them is just like calm and supportiveness. And you don't want your senses to be overwhelmed, and it sounds like they kind of were. And so and I get that. Like some parents, like my dad did the same thing. But I think it's just how like that generation,
Generation
I
was,
guess.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
don't hold it against my parents, and it's
Yeah.
so, well, it's not funny, but like my dad's no longer here, but my mom, she was always just like, I always tell her about different things that I learned, and she's always like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, it's okay, like I was like, I'm not mad at you. I was like, it was, your mom's mom, but your mom's mom's mom, like
Yeah.
this is just carried down from generations. I was like, but the good thing is, I was like, everybody loves to talk about millennials. I go, but the
Yeah.
millennials are changing the way that they raise their children. And I've
Yeah.
always been very, um, I've always advocated for my children. Like, I don't want to create that environment. Like, yes, they'll make mistakes, but my biggest thing is like, normally I'm just like, I just need to calm down because I don't want that reaction. Because sometimes I do have that reaction, but uh, my thing is I'm very transparent with them. I'll be like, you know
Yeah.
what? I shouldn't have done that. That was me overreacting. And I
Mhm.
just try and give them a more soothing, calmer environment. So that way, even if there is, I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm sure I've given some kind of trauma to my kids. Like, even if, it does happen, my biggest thing is like, okay, well, now that I know better, like I can talk to them different. I can tell them like, hey, you make mistakes. It's totally fine. It's like when we continue to make the same mistakes, what are we're not learning something. And that's when I kind of like tell them like, this is why you don't do this, or I just give them reasoning because a lot of what we were all told is because I said so. Well,
Yeah.
why? Because I said so. But mine, like, well, because you're part of this family and everyone picks up. So yeah, it sucks. But hey, if not, it's only me. Like, would you only want me to clean everything? Or
Yeah.
do you think it should be a family effort? So my biggest thing is like explaining it and giving them that calm, soothing, like patient environment they really do need because, their brains are still developing. We're learning about this.
No,
And
exactly.
this is the most vital stage in their brain development that, not that it's like mush, but it's like we help shape who they will become to be. So my biggest thing is I want them to remember their childhood as something happy, not like,
Yeah.
oh, like my parents did this or my parents did that. I'd rather them turn around and be like, they weren't the best, they weren't perfect, but they loved me and they cared for me.
No, exactly. And like that, you're giving your kids predictability. You are literally telling them that like if you do something wrong, they know that you're gonna come back and explain it to them. And that is something that they have in the back of their heads. Like they're never gonna be scared. And that is so important because their brain will never be constantly on alert. So also, I just got an alert that says I have 10 minutes left on my free video. So if anything, if
Oh,
it
we might just jump back on.
yeah.
Okay.
Just to let you
Sorry, Professor. Two videos.
know. Um, okay, so for chapter 6 of the same, not the same, the Vanderkolk book, what is
Mhm.
the default state network and why is it important understanding these traumas? So, understanding trauma is very important for understanding how kids were raised and understanding why people think the way they do. And I think the default state network, I kind of imagined it as like a big spider web and just how like people reacted to, not reacted, how they were when they were at rest and not like super focused on something. So like how their normal state was when they were like daydreaming, like just sitting there comfortably, like what their brain was doing while they weren't stressed. And so like if they were like, oh, thinking about like yesterday or thinking about the future, stuff like that, like maybe not necessarily happy, but like how they perceive like an outside world of reality is kind of how I
Mhm.
imagined it. And trauma affecting that being like if you're traumatized, you're not thinking happy thoughts, you're thinking negative thoughts about your future or you're scared for your future. And so I that's kind of what I associated it with. I'm interested to hear what you associated it with, but
No, that was honestly perfect. And I like how you said it's spider webs because you're right. Like there's different ways that, a person can be acting and it's more about their external environment and not really being attuned to it and kind of being like, okay, like just, I know as silly as it sounds like, la, 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 like I'm just going
yeah.
about my day, but I almost feel like it's kind of linked to like your intrusive thoughts. So I
Mhm.
know for me, because of my background and like what I've been through, I feel like sometimes I can be sitting here and I'm like, I do lose focus fast. Like I have to have like my headphones and I have my noise cancellation and half the time I'm like because I
Yeah.
just can't hear things around me because if not like I start to think like weird things like crazy things like oh I don't know why but like something will come in my mind that just
Yeah.
like randomly like oh the other day when the car crash like dang that sucked like imagine if I died damn that would suck but then I kind of sit there and I'm like oh my God like why did you think that
Why am
like
I thinking
it
that?
went from
Yeah.
like yeah, I'm like it went from like 0 to 100 and I'm just like, oh no, I'm like, great, it's me. Like I'm reading about me. I'm like, that's why I do, but it's very interesting to see that I've always kind of like thought it was not necessarily something wrong with me or like in my head. I've always just been like to myself because I was always told as a child, like you're so
Yeah.
dramatic, or it was just me being super either, sensitized and then just overstimulated that everything was like it was like the end of the world to me. Like
Yeah.
certain things where I was just like, and I kind of correlated that with, that's kind of how my state of mind was. And that's how I guess a traumatic mind would kind of think, like my intrusive thoughts sometimes get the better of me and I can be doing literally nothing and nothing really causes it. It's just for some reason, like I'll hear a song or something that will connect me to an event. And then immediately I'm like, oh, like I could have died, or imagine if that happened again. Or yeah,
Just
it's
like a
very interesting, but it's it's very eye-opening, like, okay, so there isn't anything wrong with me. It was just like my background. Like I know it's kind of silly to say, but I've always like kind of like in the back of my head, like I
yeah.
have some crazy thoughts. Like, do other people? And now my mom's just like, well, what do you learn about in school? And I was like, that it was you. And then she's like, I'm so sorry. But I always like mess around with her. I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, but now I'm learning like how
Good.
to
Yeah.
deal with it and different like, and my biggest thing is like seeing the clues in either children, whether it be like my nieces, my nephews, and just like recognizing that and just being like
Yeah.
a supportive person to all the babies. I love all the babies.
Yeah. I it's very like intrusive, like everything that people think of, like it's like deja vu kind of. You're like, why am I like why like this doesn't feel familiar, but it is. Like I feel it. I just I'm not. It's kind of like weird how sorry, our brains work. Um, I guess relating to that, we can move into chapter 7, which is about it, which one of the questions was about attunement. And we can provide some examples about either personal or professional lives of what it looks like. I did personal, just because I'm still in school. So my professional life is like a server. So that's not, I don't know, it could be, but my example for attunement, which is just basically being sensitive to another person, and I associate it more with like empathy,
Yeah.
and that's how I guess understood it, and just taking it a step further. My friend just recently went through a breakup, and so I've been through a breakup long time ago, but like, and I'm very happy in my relationship right now, but I tried to like imagine myself in their shoes and put them, I guess, first. And so I just like listened to her and comforted her and validated her feelings and just made it all about her. And I was very much listening to what she wanted to do and just like spending time with her. And I think part of the question was relating it back to the last unit about, I can't remember the specific things, but like being present in that person's life. And I think it was like building blocks or an article about building
Yeah.
blocks, like
Yeah.
serve and
Mhm.
return or something like that. And like that nonverbal communication of you just being present is so important. And so that's kind of what I thought of when I thought of attunement, is just like every aspect of you is being present, whether that's like nonverbally your presence or just verbally like talking. So do you have anything that you thought of for an
Yeah.
example?
And I think it's funny that you say it, or like it correlates for you as empathy because it does for me also. I because after this, my goal is to transfer and get my master's. So initially, I was looking into programs to volunteer from, which I do. I volunteer for a program called CASA LA. So long story short, I work with the foster youth in the system, just one child,
Yeah.
and I have to spend 16 hours with them every month. But aside from that, I work with their social worker, their foster parents, everyone in the system just to ensure that they're getting what they need. And I just got assigned my youth maybe about a month ago. And I have to attend court with her. And I remember just being there and we like locked eyes. And it was when her mom was giving up rights finally, which long story short, it's for the best. But unfortunately, she is a child of 8 and the mom only gave her up.
No.
So we were sitting in the courtroom together, and it was one of those times where I'm like, I couldn't really say anything in that moment. And we just sat there together, and I just held her hand and we just sat there. So I felt like I was very attuned to her in that moment, like of what she was going through. Like no words could probably,
Yeah.
help the situation. And my biggest thing was like, I just want her to know that like I'm here for her. Obviously, I don't know what she's going through, but I was just there for her. And I remember her texting me later on, like, thank you so much. Like, she was like, I was trying to hold it back. I was like, girl, I was like flooding tears in the courtroom. I was like, and she just like, oh, she at first I was like, oh no, I was like, I'm so sorry. I thought like I embarrassed you because we are
Yeah.
still fairly strangers to each other, but like know everything about her from reading all her her case files. So it's just it's different seeing like this aspect and reading about this aspect because I'm on the other side of the spectrum of like I just want all the babies to be loved and everyone
Yeah.
to feel like they're,
No,
that they
exactly.
belong.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's for me that was my personal and like obviously like for either like professional, I work in construction. I am not nice to nobody. They can all
Exactly.
yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Um, no, yeah, I think just being there physically is so important and can do like actions speak louder than words, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, but it does say less than a minute, so I'm kind of worried. Do you think we should just like end this one and then join?
Yeah. Oh yeah, because we have what? We have one.
And two, three, four. We have a few left.
Okay, yeah, let's end this one and then we'll start a new one.
Okay, bye.
Okay.